if we have a lot of inflation, it becomes a lot easier to pay back debt because, the best hedge against inflation is debt.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Campfire Capitalism Podcast. I am your host, Desmond Dixon. And today, no Heather, but I'm joined with our boy, Josh. What's up, Josh, fellow co-host?
Hey.
Josh in the building. Today, we have a good one for you. We have literally a legend among legends. This guy's story is freaking amazing. He's traveled all over the world, touched every continent. He's, this real estate mogul here in the United States, and a very exciting guy, very down to earth. And I'm super excited to introduce you guys to Mr. Jeffery Holst. What's up, Jeffery?
Hey, not too much. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm excited to be here.
Cool. Jeffery, did I just butcher your last name or
no, you got it. A lot of people say a hoist, like it's an I, but it's an L, like a holster, right? Like the gun thing, but without the gun and without the ER. So yeah, you did great.
Dude, awesome, man. Awesome. 1 for 1. But hey, let me just, introduce you a little bit to our audience and kind of understand who you are. And then we'll kind of dive into your story, man. Cool?
Sure.
Awesome. So, Mr. Jeffery, where do I begin first? Let's focus on here, right? So Jeff has gone from riches to rags and back. He's currently owns over 300 residential units and multiple commercial properties. He is the co-host and founder of the Last Life Ever podcast, woo woo, and is passionate about helping people live the best possible version of their lives. He is also the co-host of the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show, where the co-hosts drink bourbon, old fashioned, and talk about real estate investing. I might have to jump on that show for sure with some whiskey. Let's get it. What's up, Jeffery, man? I'm excited to have you, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, and I'm drinking water out of an old fashioned glass today, so hopefully I'm not too far off brand,
Oh, good, man. Good. We're on point. So let Josh start today's pod off, man. Let's let you start it off, big dog.
Yeah. So first of all, Jeff, thank you for being here. One of the things that jumped out to me in the bio was you said you started off with rags to riches back to from riches to rags back to riches. Let's talk about that a little bit more. When it comes to like overcoming adversity, you stepping into, I'm assuming different levels of yourself, as you continue to grow, whether it's, through entrepreneurship as a man, as a leader, in this world. Would love to hear more, about that part of your journey.
Yeah, sure. So, the short version is it sounds outrageous when I say it out loud. So I apologize for people who haven't heard my story, but this is the honest to goodness truth, what happened to me. I grew up upper middle class, right? So, I had, a fair amount of resources growing up. My parents had a few rentals. My dad was an attorney. I ended up going to law school and becoming a lawyer, and I was doing bankruptcy law, and this was like 2008. So we were doing really well, right? Like everyone was filing bankruptcy back then, and hopefully that's not coming again, but it feels a lot like 2007 right now. So we'll see. But all these people filing bankruptcy and I really did feel like we were helping them out. I know that bankruptcy is tough, but they were in a really tough spot and we're able to help them, and it felt good. And I could have kept doing that. It wasn't my passion. It wasn't like I was following my life's dream or anything, but I was making good money. I even had a television commercial, right? Like I was that guy, like, the Better Call Saul of West Michigan, if you will. And so I'm doing the television commercial thing and all that. And then I went to Machu Picchu in Peru, and I just didn't feel right. And when I came back, I thought I'd picked up like a parasite or something in the Amazon, because we also went swimming in the Amazon on that trip. And And I just couldn't get better. So I went to an ER or, an emergency room type place or some one of those places, like, like doc in the box type place. And because I didn't even have a regular doctor back then. I just, I was 30 years old. So you just don't think about it that much. And they gave me some antibiotics and I didn't get better. And so I went back in again after a few days and they decided to do some blood work because I developed these like weird bruises all over me. And long story short, about 10 hours later, I get a phone call on a Saturday night. And this doctor says to me, he says, there's no easy way to tell you this, but you have leukemia and you have to come to the hospital right now. So that was a bit of a shock, obviously. So I ended up, heading to the hospital and flash forward a little bit. And I thought I was going to die for a while. And then it turned out I wasn't going to die, which was good. But by the time I found that out, I'd been sick for a while and I ended up bankrupt myself. So I was a bankruptcy attorney that went personally bankrupt. So I literally went from making more money than I'd ever made in my life, going to Peru, just sort of being on top of the world, looking down at this Incan city, to in the hospital bed dying in like 2 weeks. And then, a year later, I ended up personally bankrupt. At that point, I decided to quit practicing law and start investing in real estate. I took a job in Tennessee. And I just said to myself, I have to do something different because you can't count on your health. And so I did the real estate investing on the side for about 5 or 6 years. And then my company that I was working for was getting sold to a bigger company. And I was just like, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to go work for a publicly traded company. I already don't like working for a small company. I knew I wasn't going to want to work for a big one. So I took a severance and thought I'd figure something else out, maybe go back to practicing law or something. And it was 6 months severance and 6 months went by and I still had about the same amount of money. And I went, how about that? Real estate investing is really helpful. And so I thought, I could probably do another 6 months without going back to work. And that was several years ago. I never went back to work and now I have a lot more money than I had when I quit working. So it's worked out really well. And it turns out that if you get some time, this is like a life principle of mine. If you get some time to it's like your best thinking is always done on vacation or on the weekend. Right? Or in the shower, it's always when you have some like quiet time. Well, if you get some really good time to yourself. And when I first quit working, I thought I'm going to take a month off and do nothing. And I went to my dad's condo in Florida and I sat around a pool with a bunch of retired folks and they'd say to me, hey, so you're here on vacation. And I was like, no, I think I'm retired. And I was just joking at first, but then after a while I went, actually, I don't have to go back to work. Like this could be pretty good. And then it just became a goal of mine to just, not go back to work. And I would have never done that if I hadn't had that opportunity and having those resources, plus having the life experience of really recognizing that life is super short caused me to think, I need to live my life differently.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Seriously, it's I know that I know Dad is big in real estate investing. I'm not there yet, but one of my life goals is to be able to pass along 4,000 either units or doors onto my kids. And just going down that path, hearing your journey and some of the stuff that you were just sharing, it's very inspiring, especially for a young person when to get into the space. I was in the mortgage lending space in 2014, 2015, this is like when reverse mortgages were the hottest thing out. Everybody was either, it was either really yay or it was really nay. It was just like, oh man. So it's very similar to the whole 07, 08, bubble and this, I say every market is a cycle, especially with real estate and stock market and mortgage lending, all that. So yeah, I'm even seeing certain things that we're dealing with right now, kind of circling back around, which I think we've been overdue for some time, to be honest. But, just knowing that you're in that space and you're not repeating the experience that you've had, but you're like elevating it. In other words, it shows that like in that time of, at least that's what I'm gathering from it, that in that time of, being a bankruptcy lawyer, you've seen at least what works, right? Whether it's through your family, whether it's through people around you, just what have you. And it happened since you're able to see what had worked at that time. And instead of you going back into that shuffle, which I'm pretty sure a lot of BK lawyers who are listening to this podcast, you might want to start looking into real estate investments, just because, as you know, besides the heyday, or what we used to call it in the mortgage industry, when people, it's a lay down sale, things are going to have to turn back up after it comes back down, and at that point, it's a matter of what position you're going to be in. You were prepared, maybe not even from what I'm gathering, even realizing that was a space you were going to be in. You were still in position for yourself to even move and shift, where you saw that necessary. So that's inspiring to hear from, what I'm gathering from it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And the fact that, shout out to Peru, Machu Picchu, that's one of the places I really want to go to within the next year or so. I studied Mesoamerican studies in college, and, Mayans, Incans, Aztecs, I fell in love with just oh my God, just the Latin culture within itself. So I think that's absolutely amazing. I definitely want to pick your brain more about your experience, there, because I definitely plan on going within the next year. So.
Oh, you definitely should, because Peru is amazing. I haven't been back in a long time now, but actually the whole of Central America and Northern South America is amazing. And I just got back from Argentina a few weeks ago, and down in Terra del Fuego, in the very far south of Argentina, in Ushuaia. And it honestly was probably one of the coolest places I've ever been, besides Antarctica, which is why we were down there. But the traveling it opens up your world so much, right? And I really believe that I would not have been able to bounce back in the way I did if I hadn't taken the time to experience things. Because one of the fundamental principles in my mind for overcoming any kind of adversity is believing that things can get better. And when you see the kinds of and also believing, by the way, that things can get worse. It's recognizing that you are where you are, and then taking responsibility for it. And actually, let me finish my first thought, but I want to put a pin in that for 1 second and say this: Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning, he has this quote where he says, "The moment you take responsibility for everything in your life is the moment you can change anything in your life." So, when I got leukemia, I had to recognize it wasn't my fault that I got leukemia, but it was my responsibility, because no one else was going to take care of it. I mean, yes, I had doctors and stuff, but I also had to call the doctor and make sure that they were doing what they needed to do. And I needed to find the best doctors, because if I didn't do that, the other option would be just lay down and die, right? Those are the options that I had at the time. And I mean, I literally went into my doctor and I was like, listen, I need the best doctor. If you were diagnosed with what I have, who would you go to? And at first they didn't want to even tell me. And then finally they were like, well, there's this one doctor in Texas that invented the treatment that I'm prescribing to you. I'd probably want to go see her. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go see her. Right. And he's like, I don't even think that she's taking patients. And I'm like, I'm going to go see her. You don't understand. I'm going to do it. And that attitude, right, combined with what I was starting to say, with the knowledge that things can always get better and they can always get worse. When you combine those two things, you can look at whatever situation you're in and say, if I make the right decisions right now, I can change it slightly better. I can't necessarily fix leukemia. I could have died. It's possible there was no solution, but I can still live the best possible version of whatever time I have left. And that's my goal all the time, is to lean into the best version of my life, whatever that is to me. And I mean, it's different for everyone, but that's what I'm always trying to do.
Man, this is some good stuff. I have a question, man. So you went through this interesting journey, this life-changing experience, coming from an amazing trip, a once in a lifetime kind of trip, right? And then you go through this, you file bankruptcy, and then you got into real estate for a few years. The first, as we know, in real estate, the first couple of properties are always the hardest. Once you get in that little nibble in, it starts to compound, and the doors are open, right? Your beliefs change. So talk to us a little bit about your first few deals, and Yeah, let's talk to us a little bit about your
Sure.
first few deals and like how you got into it for people who are listening who are interested in getting real estate. If you came from cancer and bankruptcy and got into real estate, anyone can get into real estate.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I obviously had some disadvantages. I had no money because I had just gone bankrupt. In fact, I had a negative net worth, right? My student loans didn't go away. So I had $100,000 in student loans and no assets. And also had closed down my law firm and had just taken a brand new job. So I didn't have income history. And I had terrible credit because I just filed bankruptcy. So from like a lending perspective, I was kind of screwed. And no money, no ability to borrow money. And a lot of people would just say, well, that's it. I can't do real estate. I've got to wait 10 years till my bankruptcy drops off. If I had done that, I'd have like zero real estate now. I know that for sure. It's been like, it's 11, 12 years now since I filed. And, obviously I didn't wait 10 years or I'd just be getting started. So what I did is I started saving and I started talking to people I knew that were doing the kinds of things I wanted. And I had one friend in particular that I said to him, listen, I've saved up about $15,000, $16,000. If you run into something that we can partner on, even if I only end up with 10% of it, I want to invest this money that I've saved up. And it turned out, it was 2011 by then, and the market was very cheap. And we ended up buying a condo for cash for $30,000 and a 50-50 partnership. So the very first deal I did, but we didn't have any resources except for this little bit of money that was saved. I mean, it wasn't an insignificant amount, but it wasn't also like, but you can't buy much real estate with $15,000 these days, right? And so we bought this condo and we rented it out right away for like $650 a month. And I was like, this is amazing. I get this check every month, no matter what. And but I didn't need it because I had a job. So I just said to my partner, I said, listen, whatever money we get, let's just let it build up in our account. And we're just going to let it compound. When we have a little bit more money, we'll buy something else. And about a month after we had that conversation, another condo in the same building came up for sale. And these, by the way, these were bank-owned foreclosures, bottom of the recession. They had been $100,000 condos a couple of years earlier. We still own both of them. Okay, so that we've done really well. They're probably worth 150, maybe more now a piece. And we bought the second one for like 34,000. I didn't have any money. I just spent all my money, but my partner had some money and he actually loaned me half of the money for the condo. So a relationship, leverage a relationship to get that done. And then once we had two, like you said, it gets a little bit easier. I mean, we came across another deal a few months later, and neither of us had any money. So we went to another person that we knew and we said, hey, we have this deal and we have these two paid off condos. Like, why don't you loan us some money against our condos and then put some of your own money in? And so we ended up taking a $25,000 mortgage on each condo. And then that third person put in another $25,000 and we went and bought a duplex for about $70,000 in cash. We still own that duplex and it's on a double lot. Later, flash forward like 7 or 8 years, we ended up buying a couple of more lots next door and we're looking at developing that. And that area is just on fire right now. And it's probably, those 4 lots together are probably worth $1 million. And, we maybe have 300,000 into the 4 of them or something crazy like that. And they've been cash flowing the whole time. So, I mean, like you said, to your point, it does get a lot easier. But the trick, I think, is accepting responsibility for where you are, even if it's not your fault, and figuring out what the next best move is that you can make. And if you want to get into real estate, you've got to bring something to the table. It's either going to be cash or deals or hustle or knowledge or some combination of those things. And if you're willing to do that, then there's a way to figure it out. It's important to understand your market though, and understand where you are in the cycle. I mean, quite honestly, I got stupid lucky, right? I happened to go bankrupt right at the worst time in history and then was willing to take action and buy real estate when it was the best time to buy real estate in history. I mean, real estate had gone down 40, 50% in the years immediately before we started buying. And now it's gone up, way more than what it had gone down back then. And that scares me a little bit. Having lived through the previous downturn as a bankruptcy attorney, I've seen what happened to people that over leveraged. And as a result of that, I'm pretty conservative in my leveraging. I think leverage is important, but you do need to be thinking about when are your notes going to be due? Because not all notes are fully amortizing, which means they don't necessarily, like your personal mortgage on your house, it might go for 30 years. And as long as you pay your mortgage payment, it's fine. But when you start doing investments, a lot of times the bank will give you 20-year amortization, but after 5 years, you've got to pay it off or refinance it. Well, what you don't want to do is refinance or have to sell in the middle of a recession. So right now, my big concern is how do I get longer term fixed rate financing as much as possible, especially because I think interest rates are going up. The Federal Reserve yesterday, I don't know when this will come out, but today is mid-March of 2022. And yesterday, the Federal Reserve just raised interest by a quarter point. And they indicated in their notes that they plan on raising interest rates 6 more times this year. That's a lot of interest increases, and that will have an impact on slowing the growth of the real estate market. We're not going to see incredible growth forever if they actually do that. Now, the problem, and you alluded to this earlier, is that there's so much manipulation in the market now, the Fed being part of it, but also all the other governmental regulators, plus the big hedge funds and stuff, that it's really difficult to predict the cycles. So if you want to time the real estate market, my best advice would be the only way you can time it is just always be buying and only sell when it's high, right? So right now, if you've been sitting on something that's a problem property, it's time to sell because it's high right now.
I love that you said that too. There was, just from the mortgage space, it's even when I saw the article yesterday that, they talked about, increasing the, interest rates again and all that. And it's just like, oh my God, man, people people that know, people that don't know, they're just kind of just like, gas prices. Yeah. We're big. It's so much bigger than that, everything when they're raising rates, everything is affected by that. Your credit cards, your auto loans, your mortgage loans, of course, it depends on what type of financing you got. But within the real estate space, it's interesting because I remember seeing so many different people, and I used to be just amazed. That's actually what intrigued me initially within real estate, or as far as the investment side of things, is realizing how creative the financing started to get. That's why I love what you said before about how, when you're getting in the market, it's getting into real estate brings something to the table. A lot of times people just have passion. Oh, I'm passionate. Yeah, go take that to CBRE or go take that to, just your residential brokers down the street. They're going to be like, okay, you might have passion, but do you have the knowledge for it? Do you have the passion to actually learn the industry, or just the passion to make money? Those are two different things. Do you have the money? Because that's the biggest hurdle that so many people have, is just not having enough money. So it's even if you don't have that, there's so many ways that you can get involved with real estate investing and do it in such a grandiose way where it's, or even if it's joining a capital firm, whatever it is, there's so many different things, or a venture capital firm, there's so many different things you can do. That way you can mitigate your risk, but you're also maximizing what reward you can gain from it. And you're learning along the way. That was one thing I wrote down. And Des, I'll let you take over from here. I love this type of stuff.
I love it, man. Yeah.
It's that's one thing I took from what you said, was just getting to makes it so much easier. And it's one, it can be, just from the amount that is coming in, from just having two tenants that are, essentially paying your mortgage, depending on how much that is. But it's also realizing that once you have two, you can then, Des and I talked about, or Desmond's actually the one that told me about it, when it comes to being able to play the money game and just understanding if you can get 2, you can get 4, you can get 4, you can get 16, and just continue exponentially, increasing over time. And real estate is that space where you can do it a lot. I want to say, in my personal opinion, effortlessly, once you really understand what you're doing. And I think so many people think it's rocket science, and it's actually the complete opposite of that. It's
super simple.
All you have to do is
it's
the right
it's
product,
absurd.
The right people. Oh yeah, 100%.
It's absurd how easy it is. And I'm sorry to cut you off there. I apologize, but
no, you're good.
The truth is, I just do the same thing over and over again, right? Like once you learn how to do it, like if you do good at it, then just keep doing it. And like the reason it gets easier is you're not as scared and you know what you know, right? So each time you do it, you're going to learn a little bit. Your first deal is going to be super hard because you're going to be scared. You're not going to know what you don't know. Your second deal, you're going to know a little bit more. You're going to be a little less scared and it's going to get a little easier. And you're going to find the money. Like if you have good knowledge and good deals, people are going to understand that you know what you're talking about. And there's a lot of money out there. You know, you don't have to use your money all the time. Like, especially now, they printed so much money. Like they're basically giving money away. They're loaning money below the rate of inflation. So raising rates, it doesn't actually really, I mean, it does in fact impact everything, but it doesn't really make real estate unattractive. It makes it comparatively less attractive, right? I mean, if you have to pay more to get the same amount of purchasing power, I guess it's a problem, but it's not going to be enough to offset inflation. I mean, when inflation's 7 or 8%, people don't go, oh, because this is how that works, right? They raise rates. The idea is it'll attract money into the banks and away from investment, right? Because they're paying a higher rate on your money. And if they raise rates too, the other thing that'll happen is people are less likely to borrow, right? So if you're less likely to borrow to invest, then you're not going to, stimulate the economy as much. And it basically puts a brake on the economy. It's one of only 2 ways the Federal Reserve can impact the money supply. They can either raise interest rates or they can change fractional reserve lending. And they never change fractional reserve lending because it's very disruptive. So it's always 10 times. I mean, last time they changed it was like 50 years ago, right? They just don't change that. So, I mean, listen, the thing about it is though, like when inflation's 7%, if they raise rates to 4%, I mean, you're still better off in being invested. So it's going to slow it a little, but it isn't going to make it completely unattractive. In the 70s, to get rates under control, to get inflation under control, they ended up raising interest rates up to like 12, 13%. They had to get above inflation to make it work. And we could be going there, depending on how much the Federal Reserve really wants to get inflation under control. The problem is, unlike the 70s, right now we have a tremendous amount of national debt. Back then we had a very comparatively small amount of national debt. The national debt is, when you raise interest rates, that means we have to pay more interest on the debt that we as a nation have. And when you owe trillions of dollars, raising the rate 1% matters, right? And when the budget of the US is like it's like $1 trillion a year or whatever, like it's less than that. It's like 800 billion or something a year, right? And so if you raise interest rates on $20 trillion, 1%, that adds $200 billion in expense. If you raise it 4%, it adds 800 billion. And now you're paying more interest than the total budget of the US, right? Like there's a limit to how high we can raise rates right now. And, the cynical side of me thinks they're just talking about rates raising and they're not really going to raise them that much. They're looking at the debt and saying, if we have a lot of inflation, it becomes a lot easier to pay back debt because, the best hedge against inflation is debt. If inflation's 10% and you owe $1 million and you just wait a few years, in fact, at 10%, if you wait 7.2 years to be exact, you only pay it back with half. I mean, you still pay $1 million, but the $1 million is worth half as much, right? So your rents will have doubled during that 7 years, and you just pay the debt back with cheaper money in the future. And the government has the ability to manipulate this. So if they want to pay back the debt, there's only 2 ways to do it. They have to either make a lot more money or they have to create inflation. And I think that's what they're doing. I think they're manipulating the market so much because they know that they've created a hole for themselves.
Man, that's deep, dude. Thanks for the one-on-one and inflation. That was deep, man. And there's some things I definitely want to unpack a little bit because there's some interesting patterns that I could definitely relate to that I think is really big for our listeners here. And that is, you met the right people, right? And you meeting people and combining your resources, your knowledge, and your money, you use group economics in order to participate in a new venture. And that's the exact same way how I got into real estate was I was a 1099. I did not have a W-2 income, which is hard for me to lend to, right? because I don't have technically stable income, right? And I moved all over the place. So I don't have a stable address because I moved from Denver to San Diego. And so I found a friend who was like, yo, I want to buy a business. I'm like, yo, let's buy real estate. And he's like, sure, he has W-2. So we use him as the financing. We went half. And then my girlfriend's father's a real estate developer, and he was the guy who managed the properties. He had the operational experience. And now I'm doing that over and over again with more friends. We're like, yo, I have cash, and I just go in. So I get the leverage, like going in with my cash, with their cash, and then with the dude's operational experience. And we're just going to do it over and over and over again. And then there's this beautiful thing. So how often do you use a 1031 exchange? Or do you like buy and never sell or refi? Like, have you ever utilized the loophole?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I call it a loophole or not, but I do them occasionally. In fact, we're in the middle of one right now. I've done like 4 total in my life. And it's been because we bought some stuff so cheap, right? Like we bought these houses in 2013 in Detroit for like $5,000 a piece. And we sold them for $50,000 a piece or something like that a few years ago. And there were 10 of them. So it was like all gains, right? Like we had invested like $50,000 and we were going to get $500,000. And there would have been a lot of tax on that. And so we ended up buying a 32-unit apartment building with that money instead. So that was the first 1031 I did. I mean, I was able to defer the tax. Now my basis in that apartment building, instead of being $1.5 million, which is what we paid for it, is only $1 million because we had rolled forward a lower cost basis into that deal. So we get less depreciation because of it. And when we sell that, we're going to have we'll have the same problem again, right? Because we have a lower basis. But for me, the easiest way to avoid capital gains tax is not to sell. I don't pay tax. Just being honest with you, I haven't paid any tax since 2017, not $1 of federal tax. Not because I do anything illegal, but because if you do real estate right, you can do 1031s, you can do cost segregations and get accelerated depreciation, which I'm a huge fan of. I mean, they're amazing. And if people need more info about that, they just reach out to me. I'll be happy to share that with them directly. I think it's outside of the scope of our conversation now, but I mean, these things are it's unbelievable how many things you can do to really minimize your tax consequences. And people tell me sometimes they're still don't you feel bad not paying tax? And I'm like, no, I actually think the most patriotic thing you can do is not pay tax, because this is how I look at the tax code. Not everyone agrees with this, but I think there's real truth in this. The government can, as we can see right now, print as much money as they need. So they don't need tax dollars, right? They have 2 options. They can either take money from us or they can just make more. Those are their options, right? That's how they get money to pay their budget. And they do both. They take money from people and then they make more money. But there's no fundamental reason why they have to take any. They could just print as much money as they need. They could pay everything and just say, we need $1 billion to build a spaceship. We're just put $1 billion into circulation, right? Because it's their money. They just make it up. And that's a different kind of tax because that causes inflation. It causes the value of the rest of the dollars to go down. And so really, if you think about that, though, the most fundamentally fair thing for them to do would just be to allow inflation to be their tax, right? That they wouldn't tax some people more than others because everyone would be taxed the same. Your dollars would go down in value. But they've made decisions, and I think correctly, by the way, that certain people would be unfairly disadvantaged by that. If you have a very low income, inflation hurts you more than if you have a high income. Right? Or if you own a lot of assets, inflation helps you and doesn't hurt you. So they've decided they're going to look at the totality of the pictures, and we're going to create a tax code that's fundamentally encouraging certain behaviors, right? So they're going to say okay, we want to encourage people to build affordable housing. As a result of that, if you build affordable housing, you get tax credits. It's not because they want people to get rich. It's because they want more affordable housing, right? So if you do the things that the government wants you to do, you change your situation to comply with what they're trying to encourage you to do, you don't pay as much tax. So to me, if you really want to be honest about it, the more patriotic you are, the more you do the things the government wants you to do, the less tax you pay. Now, it's not quite that simple, right? Because, there are things that the government does that I disagree with and things they do that I agree with. And I mean, that's true for everybody, right? But at the baseline, there's a lot of I mean, if you just change Tom Wheelwright, who's a Rich Dad advisor, he's a CPA for Robert Kiyosaki. He told me once, he said, if you change your facts, you change your tax. So that's what I do. I just went, that's exactly right. I read his book after he told me that, and I went, this guy knows what he's talking about. Like, there's no reason to pay tax. All you got to do is do what the government wants you to do, and then they don't tax you. So that's what I do.
Change your facts. Let's go. This is a capitalism podcast, man. We're all for pro keep more money in your pocket, right?
Yeah, I know, of course. But not everyone feels that way, right? Like the initial reaction is like, oh, those rich people don't pay tax. Like there's a lot of reasons to question Donald Trump's behavior, right? But the fact that he didn't pay taxes isn't one of them, right? Like, he didn't pay tax because he followed I assume, I haven't seen his tax returns, obviously, but because he followed the rules and he built a bunch of apartments. And they don't tax people who build apartments because we need more housing. And, whether that's right or not, that's just a different issue, but that's the way that the tax code is written. So that's not, to me, it's not even morally ambiguous. Like, you should just do the things the government wants you to. They also want you to get married, have kids. That's why they encourage people. They give them better tax rates if they're married. They give them, they give you child care tax credits and stuff like that, because they want these things to happen. They also want you to be a homeowner, so they let you write off your mortgage interest on your house. Right? They want you to run businesses, so they let you write off business expenses. All of this stuff is good for the economy. It produces jobs, income, and all that stuff. That's why they encourage it.
Yep. Hit the nail on the head, man.
I think to kind of add to that, one of the reasons why I think the whole conversation about taxes and all that is such a taboo subject, depending on who you're talking to, is it's because we're not educated on how taxes actually work. The fact that you even if you're working a normal job, and I used to be, when I was working in corporate America, I used to be pissed because I see all my coworkers, they'd be balking at the fact that oh my God, they're taking so much out of my check, or, oh my God, yes, I'm getting that refund. I'm like, that's your money that you already had. Why should I have to wait for you to steal from me? Then all of a sudden say, hey, I'm sorry, I stole a little bit too much. Here you go. And then for me to think that you somehow did me a favor, because people used to I have to go to HR all the time because they'd be like, hey, you have about 6 allowances on here. And I'm like, yeah, keep it the way it is. But I was like, I just want to advise you. I'm like, yeah, I know. I already have my advisor. Don't worry. I got that taken care of. I don't need you touching my money, please. And at the end of it, I would just barely not owe anything. And for me, that was a win. I'm like, all right, at least I knew I got paid my proper amount without all the little loopholes and everything else that they try to do to take your money, then just to give it back to you.
Yeah. It's exactly right. All that an income tax refund means is that you loaned your money to the government interest-free for, 6 to 10 months while you waited for them to give it back to you. And to me, that's it's outrageous, right? In fact, if they wanted to make people way more conservative in general, which they clearly don't, but if they wanted to make us all into super capitalists, what they would do instead of taking the tax out of our checks is they would make you pay the tax bill. They'd give you your whole check and then they'd send you a bill every month. You want to talk about people ranting and raving about taxes? When you actually have to write that check, then you don't like it. They trick us into believing it's great by taking more than they actually want, and then they give us a little bit back, and everyone's like, "Oh, so great!" Both sides do this. This is not a political issue. It's not a Republican Democrat issue. When the Great Recession first started, and Bush was like, "We're going to give everyone a tax rebate, and we're going to write everyone a check for $400," and everyone was super excited. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Don't get me wrong. I prefer they give me the money back than just keep it forever. But they did the same thing during COVID, but at least there you're kind of well, the whole freaking world just shut down. We need to do something. It was emergency. But again, it's not a gift. When they give you money you deserve back, it's not a gift. Not at all. You're 100% right.
And one thing I learned from the mortgage, my bad, Des, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when you're in real estate, you get a tax refund every month. The dopamine hit. Boom. Yeah.
It's crazy. From the lending side, one of the things that we knew from the whole, from the lending and everything was that when you understand how everything in our economy or in our society is cyclical, like everybody that was so happy, I felt like the people when they're given I forget, the stimulus checks, the people that did it right were the people that took that money and actually invested it into something, or took that money and actually like invested into themselves, or earn their earning potential, whatever it was that could actually push them forward and advance them, in the future. Because the people that have worked at the banks, we know what you guys don't realize is that $1,200 check you're getting now is still coming back to our pockets at the end of the day, but it's going to come back in 1,000 times the amount that it was lent out to you. So why you guys think that's the reason why Walmart sold out and their stock skyrocketed when it first happened, because instead of people actually using that towards their basic necessities, they use that towards flat screen TVs. So consumerism went up, but our lack of with it went our lack of financial literacy, and in the end game, the big banks are the one, and the corporations are like, yeah, come back to mom and papa. Don't worry, you guys go take that money up front because it's coming back to us tenfold, or 100-fold. We have no problem with that, and it kind of goes back to the whole tax conversation. When people really know what is available to them, even within real estate investing, when people really understand the process and that it's not the most astronomical thing out there to try to figure out how to get started with the process. I believe that we'd actually have a much different society than what we have right now. And a lot more people will be more involved in, having more businesses that allow people more, or equip people to have more jobs or more opportunities out there than, just where we're at right now.
Well, and that goes back to what I said about Hal Elrod earlier, right? Like, you have to take responsibility for the situation you're in. Like, the government doesn't have for whatever reason, they don't think it's important to teach financial education, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't learn about finances. And if you give money to someone who doesn't understand finances in general, yeah, they're going to go buy something. I mean, I had my former boss, actually, was a smart guy, but no one explained finances to him, and he never understood it. And when I first met him, he was financing everything. He'd be financing cars and motorcycles and everything. I mean, just the stereos. It didn't matter. He just financed everything, and he made plenty of money, but he would just keep financing it. And he'd say to me well, I like having money in my bank account, and they only want me to give them 5% down. So why wouldn't I do it? And it's well, because, let's look at the math here. I mean, and he would say things like, well, it's 0% interest for the first 18 months. I'm like, what do you think? Why are they doing that? Because they're trying to suck people in that can't afford it. And if you can afford it, you just pay it. No, I'm not, by the way, just to be clear, if you're a super sophisticated financial operator and you make a lot of money and you go buy some furniture at 0% down that you're going to buy anyway, and you wait 12 months to pay it off, that can be a legitimate strategy. But the problem is most people don't do that. Most people pay the minimum payment for 12 months and they get hit with 20% retroactive interest. And all of a sudden they owe more than the stupid thing was worth in the first place. And now it's a year-old furniture. It's worth nothing, right? And they're stuck with all this debt. And when I was a bankruptcy attorney, people come in, and there's this thing when you do a bankruptcy, if you have secured debt, you can file a thing called the Reaffirmation Agreement. This is so you can keep your house, right? If you're current on your payments, you can go to the bank and say, hey, I know I just filed bankruptcy, but I'm going to keep paying my payments and I want to keep my house. Makes perfectly good sense in that circumstance. If you have equity or whatever, right? And there's limitations on how much equity you can have. There's all kinds of rules, and it depends on the state stuff. So I'm not giving legal advice, but people would come into my office and say, I need to keep my couch. I owe $1,500. And I'm like, you got a couch 3 years ago. It's worth if you sold it in a garage sale, you might get $50 for it. And you want to pay them $1,200 plus interest so that you can keep it. It doesn't make any sense. Go to Goodwill and buy a $50 couch. That's what you need to be doing right now. You don't need to be paying $1,200 for a couch that's used. And people just couldn't understand it. They just couldn't get it until you really had a long conversation with them. And when it clicked, they'd be like, oh my God. And that's the thing that's crazy is people that are listening to your show right now, they don't need to hear this, because those people that were paying $1,200 for a couch that was 3 years old, they're not listening to podcasts about financial education.
Zero. So I would love before we wrap up here, like, because I love obviously your story in the beginning, obviously very inspirational, impactful. What you're doing in real estate, dude, it's amazing. But as I'm traveling around the world, you have to give us the lowdown of your epic travels and the countries you've been to and like why you're doing it. Yeah, just like share a little bit about your travels, man.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, if we don't get to everything, I apologize because I've been traveling a lot the last few years. Even though, and that's weird because COVID, man, people were not traveling during COVID, but I was like, June of 2020. Well, so first of all, February 2020, right before, COVID existed, right? But like, we didn't know about it yet. I was in Africa for a month. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, went on a safari. I went down to Zanzibar and toured the spice markets and went snorkeling and deep sea fishing in the Indian Ocean, all this kind of amazing stuff down there. And I came back March 6th or March 4th or something like that, like literally right before the shutdown. Got super lucky on that trip because of the timing. And I actually may have caused COVID, but, don't tell anybody. I came back from China sick in 2019 in October. And so, probably it's my fault. Let's hope not though. I've never been officially diagnosed with COVID, so I'm going to go with it's not my fault. But, if I did, I apologize to the, 20 million people or whatever that died now of the thing. But then, so like, I got a little stir crazy by like June because everything was still shut down. And I read that some of the national parks were opening back up for limited access. And so June 3rd, I got on a plane and I flew out to Yellowstone, and I went to Yellowstone when there was nobody there. Like I'm sitting at Old Faithful with my dad, and it's June of 2020, and there was 3 people at Old Faithful when it went off. And that's usually like, a parking lot. Like you can't even get close to the stupid thing. And, we're seeing the animals and like, there's nobody there to disturb them. So they're acting normal, and that was amazing. So we drove around the West for a little bit. Then I came back from that and I went, geez, I really need to do something. So I started planning my next trip. I went to Vegas that fall. Again, nobody there. And I was being careful, man. I mean, like I literally have leukemia. Like this is an immunosuppressant disease. So I'm like masked up, wearing, doing the hand sanitizer. I got the shots as soon as I could, all that. So I'm not disregarding the risk, but I just had to keep traveling because it's important to me. And then in 2021, the beginning of the year, we went to Puerto Rico. And when I was there, I went, you know what? I want to live in Puerto Rico. So I just went to Puerto Rico a whole bunch of times last year. It was open for U.S. citizens because it's part of the U.S. You can go back and forth. So I've been going back and forth to Puerto Rico for a year now. I ended up renting a place year round, and I spend about half my time there now. Just a little under half, because there's some tax advantages to being in Puerto Rico. But if you're like Jeff and don't pay tax, it turns out that going to Puerto Rico and paying 4% sounds like a lot. So I don't want to do that. I don't want to get that 4% rate. I want to stay at my 0% rate. So I stay less than half my time in Puerto Rico. But man, I got a white sand beach, a mile in each direction, and this huge view from the 12th floor of my condo there. And it's freaking amazing. I just can't wait to get back. And then we went to Antarctica and Argentina. I mentioned that earlier. So this last year has been pretty busy, actually. I went to Puerto Rico 7 or 8 times, one time for a month, and then a couple times for several weeks. So I spent close to half the year in Puerto Rico last year. And then also went to, Argentina and Antarctica. So, and right now I'm just trying to get back to Egypt. I haven't been there in a while. Egypt's one of my favorite places in the world. I really want to get down there. I've got some more Puerto Rico trips planned. I'm going to Belize for a real estate conference coming up in June. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And, I'm just trying to enjoy my life because, you only get this one chance. And one thing I learned about when I got sick was this is it, man. One try. That's all we got. So we got to go live the best version of it. And for me, a big part of that's travel. For some people, it's not, right? Like if your dream is just to be able to sit by like my father-in-law is the perfect example of this. Like I dragged him to Puerto Rico with me, and he was kind of like, I just want to get home and ice fish. I have no interest in ice fishing, right? But he's like, why am I not ice fishing right now? And So, if your dream's just to sit on the ice and, freeze your butt off and, pull a couple fish out of the water, then go do that. It doesn't matter what it is that you want to do, right? Just go do it. If you want to start a business, start a business. If you want to be a real estate investor, do that. If I had started investing in real estate when I first wanted to, I would have never ended up bankrupt. I know that for sure. And so that's the life lesson, right? That you can't bank on your health. I actually interviewed on my show Last Life Ever, which is all about this concept, living the best version of your life. So it's called Last Life Ever. And what I interviewed a guy on there who's doing the Appalachian Trail. Actually, he did it 20 years ago. He wrote this book. His name is Jeff All. And he was like 20 years old or 21 years old when he did the trail, and he raised all this money for charity to support his disabled brothers, the disabled person care facility where I wish I could remember the name of it. I think it was called Sunshine, because it was called Walk for Sunshine. And anyway, so in his book, he talked about that. And when I talked to him, I was like, man, like it's a big commitment to take 6 months off of your career, go walk 2,000 miles in the woods. Why'd you do it? And he goes, I'd gotten into a car accident and I could have died. And I just realized, you can't bank on your health. You don't know how long you have. And it was something I knew I wanted to do at some point, and someday may never come. So you just got to go do those things, whatever they are. And, in that spirit, my wife right now, she's on the Appalachian Trail. She heard that interview with Jeff All, and she was like, I got to do that. So when I told her I wanted to move to Puerto Rico, she said, that's fine. But if I'm quitting my job, I'm going on the trail. And so she's out there right now working her way from Georgia to Maine, one step at a time, 5 million steps in a row.
Man, that's some powerful stuff. Jeff, dude, this was an awesome, awesome interview. And so where can our audience find you, man? Where can we find you?
Well, listen, if you write down Jeffery Holst and just Google me, you're going to find me, because I don't hide, right? Like I'm Jeffery Holst on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It doesn't matter, right? So I'm easy to find. And there's like a Jeff Holst in Australia that's working on a cure for cancer. If that guy ever cures cancer, he simultaneously makes my life better and worse at the same time, because now no one will be able to find me, right? But I won't have cancer anymore. So it's kind of a trade-off, So I don't know if I want to root for him or against him. I'm not sure yet. I'll let you know. And by the way, Jeff Holst, if you're listening, change your name before you cure cancer, like that would be great. But other than Dr. Jeff Holst at the University of Sydney or whatever, there are not a lot of me out there, so I'm easy to find. But Last Life Ever has a private Facebook group. It's free to join. People should join that. I love hanging out there. I do a lot on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, Jeffery Holst there as well. And my email is even Jeffery Holst. I'm just not hard to find. I've got my website, jeffreyholst.com. I know I'm very creative when it comes to naming stuff. So, and also I have a book coming out. I haven't even told any podcast that before. It's called No Bad Days. It's a book about how to give up bad days. And it tells my story of how I haven't had a bad day since I was 17 and how that works. And I love it. I think it's amazing. When the book comes out, I'm happy to come back on and talk about it, but just got a publisher contract. So I'm excited. It's probably not going to be out till fall, but people can keep an eye out for that too. And they can hear more about my story in that. The book's already written, and I think it came out really well. I'm really happy with it. So
I want to copy that book, Jeff.
Yeah, you should. Listen, remind me when it comes out, and I'm happy to sign one and send it to you, Josh.
Heck yeah.
Thank you in advance. I appreciate that.
So everyone, you can find all of Jeff's links in the show notes at the bottom. Definitely reach out to him. Super powerful man. I mean, there's so much we didn't even get to talk about today. We will love to have him back on the show for part 2.
We'll do No Bad Days, man. We'll do it. I want to do that one. We didn't even get to that. And that's like my whole thing, right? Like no bad days. It's the most important thing I do.
Heck yeah. Well, hey, leave us a rating, leave us a review, share this with a friend, download, send us some comments, send us some questions, reach out to Jeff. And if you want to come play in the sandbox with us, and if you're an entrepreneur, investor, or an amazing capital allocator, go to campfirecapitalism.com/guest and come play with us on the pod. It was nice, and we'll see you later. Peace.